but have the intellectual curiosity that will, I hope, give some small measure to who and what their government is. Principal Moss, let me thank you for your leadership, your courtesies, and of course, waiting for me. Give your principal a very big hand. Give your faculty a very big hand as well. And give the administrators a very big hand. I'm going to keep your hands going over and over. And of course, your parents and family members, give them a big hand. So the reason why I wanted to come is because I have seen a fragility, a deterioration of the understanding of the simple word democracy. It has been taken for granted, it has been maligned, made fun of, viewed as insignificant, and this is where to start. Maybe it should be in the elementary school. So as a member of the United States Congress, I have served for more than 2 decades, and you can account for the fact that I entered college as a toddler and I graduated, and then I went to Congress as a very young person. So don't start calculating, I was not born in the 1800s. But the time that I've spent on judiciary, and Sydney, thank you very much for the introduction and the rousing introduction. Forgive me. Give Sydney a big hand as well. I have to say thank you. I think I'll see you tomorrow. But being on the judiciary for so long a period of time, I've seen something called Waco. You need to look that up. That was the encounter with a religious cult. Tragic circumstances caused the increase of agitation of the contempt for government, because many people lost their lives, including federal ATF officers. I've been through the impeachment of judges, the impeachment of presidents, and as well, the desire to uphold this small book called the Constitution. It's a very small book. But I don't believe any American should have the right to castigate what the infrastructure of our government is without reading and understanding it. And so one of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention, because really to my embarrassment, we were not able to pass a voting rights bill that really impacts you. Both called the freedom to vote, creating a national holiday, protecting mail ballots, which you may want to utilize if you're in college, in the military, out of state. Maybe your grandparents want to use it. 24-hour voting has been knocked out. Drive-through voting has been knocked out. That happened in the last election. No declared designated fraud was found in the United States, and none in the state of Texas. But yet, there was a rise of 440 bills to stop people from voting. Why in a country that is founded on the likes of what we call the Founding Fathers' tragedy of no mothers, and certainly the institution of slavery that made that founding imperfect. But they still were trying to have a basic democracy which they thought might not last, because it required the general commitment that there should be the rule of the majority. The minority should be heard, but it should be where you work to get, at that time, small votes, now large votes. But in your ruling, when you become the majority, you represent everyone. That has always been my manifestation as a member of the United States Congress. I get elected no matter what pocket or corner you're in my district. You are deserving of representation and deserving to be heard. It may be unpleasant, but democracy requires you to be heard. And so we've seen over the time frame of your life, because you were only 2 years younger or 1 year younger on January 6, 2021, I can't imagine what you might have seen. Maybe you didn't see it. You having phones, social media, it probably was popping up. I think that was the day of school. Mr. Moss, was it?
Yes.
How many people were seeing it in real time? January 6, 2021. Okay, your hands are not broken. Put them outside so I can see them, please. So a good number of you. And maybe I'll get a chance. I'm going to be abbreviated. How many and what you thought about, what you thought you were seeing. Maybe someone will tell me. But it certainly was not an understanding by those who came, no matter how passionate they were about the man that they were supporting. The question was, did they really understand what democracy was and that they had the right to petition their government peacefully, or they had the right to demand that those who actually won represented them? That they're not left out in the cold. That it's not only one when people complain about the voting rights bill, and it's not constitutional. First of all, the 15th Amendment, and I'm going to encourage at least 5 of you who I'll give this little book to. It is embedded in there, the 15th Amendment, to vote. You can read that. 13th, free slave. 14th, due process. 15th, the right to vote, not to be stopped by any definition of yourself. Race, color, or creed. But also in the Constitution it says, the times and places and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulation except as to the places of choosing senators. So we do have standing in the Constitution to write those bills. Part of democracy is voting. And now we have a vacancy in the Supreme Court. Who wants to shout out who's retiring? Anybody know who's retiring? Be loud and stand up so I can see you. Thank you. A justice who has found a way to be balanced, but also one who has found his way to be a voice through the law, not through politics, for vulnerable persons. If you see this very delicate, fragile, working together start to crumble, what you know in terms of freedom of access, walking to various places, First Amendment, the economy, capitalism, or if you have a different perspective about how the financial markets or the structure of our economy should be, which is your right, and helps you, the very fact for you to be listened to is the basis of democracy, which most people take for granted. What does democracy do? It is the basis of how we interact. It's the basis of whether agencies or institutions fail or are successful. Whether you are listened to or not. Whether or not we have a peaceful transfer of government, which is not what was happening on January 6, 2021. Isn't it interesting that that happened after the most historic and the largest voter turnout in 2020 ever in the history of the United States? Now, I come at a time where some of you are saying, you know, what have we got? That's a different issue. But people who were voting in 2020, the ones who were the victors, because it's the people, wanted something different. What I have to get people to understand, in order to keep your democracy, it means that the vote is not the last action that you make. You're actively engaged in whether or not we are being held accountable. And that is those who have received the vote, including the President of the United States and Vice President. But this is a very book that speaks to the finances. Article 1 is the legislature. We have the purse strings. You have to keep the government working. Article 2 is the executive. They have to be the workers, the health department, Secretary of Health, Labor, the Justice Department. That's to the executive. And then, of course, the judiciary. And now we'll be going through a process very unique and special, and I would encourage those of you who are either thinking of being a lawyer or believe in diversity or want to know what's going to happen with the Supreme Court to really pay attention to this journey that we're about to take. And realize that the president has an opportunity to be historic in selecting a representative of a population that has never been on the court in the history of that court. And that is worthwhile in a democracy. So this morning, because I plan not to give this 3-hour presentation, I wanted to come and just strike a chord of, even as you're in Carnegie Vanguard in Houston, Texas, you have an obligation of which you may not accept, to be as curious and as interested in whether or not what has been given to you, which you have inherited through this little book and the imperfection of those who founded it, that whether or not you will keep an eye on it. Many of you have heard the word filibuster. Am I wrong? Have you heard the word filibuster?
Yes.
Anybody want to stand up and say what they think that is? Yes, please. Shout your name out.
Me?
All right.
So the filibuster is a way in which the congressmen and senators can delay or stop the passage of bills by speaking continuously and not allowing it to go to vote.
Is it in the Constitution?
No.
Okay. Let's give him a hand. Let me do a mea culpa. Not us, not in the House. We don't have filibuster. It's only in the South, in the Senate. And by the way, the House has passed Build Back Better, the infrastructure bill, the voting rights bill. We've done all of that. It goes to the Senate, the upper body. And you are absolutely right. The filibuster is a rule. And if I might use it as an example, I'm sure your tech is way above this, but it's like a teacher that says, today you'll use a rule, but tomorrow you'll use something else. That's a rule. You might want to speak to the teacher about the rule, because it is a rule. It's not in the infrastructure of HISD. It may not be in the infrastructure of Carnegie Vanguard. It is a rule. And in the give and take of education, you might want to raise a question about that. The filibuster is a rule, and guess what? All you have to do is come to the floor of the Senate and say, I'm filibustering, and then you can go to the Bahamas. You don't have to stay on the floor. You don't have to talk. You don't do anything. And the only way we can stop is that 60 votes must stop the filibuster. That really doesn't exist. It's just... And so all that we've been trying to negotiate is what we call the old days of a talking filibuster. That means you cannot stand up and say, I'm filibustering and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. You have to stand and hold the floor. These are arcane types of laws, or rules, that if you look in the 1900s, which is the last century, you'll see senators who tried to stop every form of discrimination law, and they were successful. Anything that wanted to prevent discrimination or voting or wanted to support voting, they were there standing against it. Many of the senators of yesteryear called the segregationists out. So I'm going to end on this note and try to give you just a few pieces to put together on the question of, if I leave you with anything, the value of democracy. That it just doesn't exist if we don't pay attention to it. And I'd like to make it interesting enough that it does impact you. It impacts whether we can get the reduction of student debt, which we have been pushing and pushing and pushing. But we need people in the House and Senate to join with us. We need you to pay attention, even though you haven't gotten there yet, to be able to push even the administration. That is the ability to petition the government. That is democracy, because if you look at Russia on the border of Ukraine, their people have no right to petition anything. And that is found in parts of Eastern Europe, like Belarus. Ukraine is trying to stay away from that kind of structured government. They are representing that their people do not want that. So that's where you find that your government does have balance. As China is about to have the Winter Olympics, there are governments that will not go there because of the human rights violations. And so they are petitioning on behalf of those in China who cannot stand and speak for themselves. No democracy is perfect. America is not perfect. But the only way she will get better is because of all of you. So let me just finish my remarks by saying, in this little book, the words that I love, founding fathers, both Jefferson and Madison, there's something called the Madison Papers, which, by the way, they both spoke against the tyranny of the minority, which they spoke against this rule called the filibuster. But in this little book, it says, which I always like to recite it without reading it. Of course, there's the Declaration of Independence. George Washington said that the Constitution is the guide which I never will abandon. The Declaration of Independence was a promise. The Constitution was the fulfillment. But I think the words that I like most in the Constitution, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, if you remember nothing, remember that. Establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves, our posterity, that is you, to ordain and establish a Constitution for the United States of America, to create a more perfect union. I leave you with that. As you have come to Carnegie, I know that you are looking every day to create the most perfect school, maybe perfect life, maybe a perfect future. But you cannot abandon, and I hope that you will know, the preciousness of democracy that belongs to each and every one of you. Thank you for letting me come, and I will answer one or two questions, but thank you for having me this morning. Does anyone have a question or comment? Question or a comment?
Please stand. I saw a hand over here.
Well, yes, help me out, Principal. Does he need you need a mic?
Yeah.
Is this-
Okay.
Ms. Jackson Lee, you talked about how democracy should represent the interests of their people. I was wondering what your opinions are about Kirsten Sinema not delivering upon her promises during her campaign for her senatorship.
We always, thank you for the question. We always start out with the appropriate decorum of these are our friends, distinguished senator from Arizona. We always start out with that. If you ever looked at the floor, you saying the distinguished gentlelady, gentleman, or the honorable senator. Here's the take that I have. Democracy does allow for me to disagree. And that means for the senator to disagree. You are absolutely right. There is a moment when you must adhere to how you got elected. And I would venture to say that the people in Arizona who were the base of her election are extremely unhappy. And it is not a question of principle. She has every right to do that. Again, I consider her a colleague, a friend. We work together. But in the moment of crisis which we're in as relates to getting ready for the 2022 elections, you have to put the greater good over self. And so it is not opposition to voting rights. It is a worshiping of the filibuster. Idol worshiping. And what did I say the filibuster was? A rule. So I can only say to you, great disappointment, but we're not giving up. We're going to find a way to get those bills back on the floor and to get them voted on. We will strategically find ways that are allowed to do it without rules. But I do believe that the senators, plural in question, and Mitch McConnell's conference, that's 50 people not voting for it. They have to ask themselves, do you put yourself above the greater good? Because when the mail ballots in Houston are being thrown out, there's nothing on there that says that more Democrats are being thrown out, Republicans are being thrown out. They're all being thrown out. All of your grandparents, veterans, disabled persons are being thrown out because they don't have that little number that matches their voter registration card. And which I'm going to speak of, by the way. How about a state like Texas that ran out of voter registration cards in the midst of the deadline, which is January 31st. And I have some here, and voter registration cards, can they be just passed out? They're plain, they can just be passed out. You can give them to someone, but I'd like to see people getting them right now. You want to just give them out? Students, you can help give them out. Everybody get one, and we'll leave the rest. If you're 17 and 11 months, the last time to register to vote is January 31st. It can be postmarked, and I'm just giving you all one. Just I have one. Just giving you one. I'm just giving you one. Believe it or not, the state of Texas didn't have enough of these. Didn't have enough paper. And we are a huge state. So if you wanted to register, you might not be able to get one. But I answered your question, sir. Excuse me, did I answer the question? You cannot put the idea of the rule above the very infrastructure, foundation of democracy. That's the quarrel that I have with those two individuals. The filibuster is not of that level. Thank you. Anyone else? I'm going to have the courage to ask a question. I'm going to be going in a minute. Anybody else? Go right ahead. Go for it.
Hi. So
Hi.
I was, so obviously I was meeting a little bit prior to your visit, just to sort of learn who you were. And I was wondering about 13 years ago, I believe you voted against allowing gay to adopt children. And I was wondering if your opinion has changed on that at all, just because I know that you're a representative from Texas, and so you are meant to represent us. I'm heavily involved in everything you say, so it's sort of like an issue that's of great import to me, you could say, and I was just curious.
I'm glad you asked. I have no recollection of that, and I'll go back and look it up, because I never voted against those issues. So I have to make sure that you were reading the right thing. Maybe it was in a omnibus bill that is poisonous, because there are a lot of things in there, and you vote for the ultimate issue, which is funding something. But if it was a freestanding bill, I wouldn't have voted against it. So I will go back and look. So I don't have to change my position, because I never opposed that position. And have been, this is not a campaign, but I've been endorsed by the caucus every single time that I have run, and that's a long time. Thank you for bringing it up. I will go back and look. 2013? Yeah, I'm sure it was in a big bill, and thank you for that. That's why it's good to come out, so you can check things. Now, as soon as I leave here, I'll have someone look it up, okay? Thank you. Anyone else? Don't be hesitant. I'm looking. Okay, then I'll get over here. Yes.
I'm Jackson Lee with a comment. A big thank you on behalf of Carnegie Mellon Student Council. We really hope you continue your legacy and promoting honesty and curiosity.
Thank you. Call on me anytime. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Over on this side, or somebody was pointing to someone anywhere. Gotta get your hands up high. Weren't you raising your hand over there? No? Someone here again? Yes. all going to be about what you frame democracy as. I mean, you know, the future is all you. I mean, I think America is not perfect, but it is the most perfect system as it relates to democracy. It's the oldest democracy. It has to be refined. It has to be modified to the extent that diverse people are here. This is the overlay to democracy. It was monolithic when the founding fathers wrote this, and the only diversity was the indigenous people, of which were not treated with respect. We're still fighting to do that. Our Native Americans, and then the slaves were slaves, so they didn't have to deal with anything but a monolithic view. They didn't know and see this kind of richness of diversity. But democracy has lasted even with this richness of diversity. The question is, can it continue to last? Can voices be heard that are disparate and different? And can people come together and say, let us try to hear all voices and then give empowerment to voices, and that doesn't undermine the United States of America and or democracy. That's what happened on 2021, January 6th, is that there was this tyranny of the minority that wanted to destroy because they didn't get their way. And the only way that you're going to keep this democracy is that people will find another way rather than go up against brother or sister like they did in the Civil War, which we managed to get through. But yes, it can survive if you're in the mix. All right? Anyone else? They got quiet over here.
We have one more hand on this side.
Okay, this side is heavy. I'm not leaving until, and I need to go. So somebody over here needs to raise their hand. There were a few people over there. So I'm going to take this and look back over here and see if there's someone that feels motivated. Yes, where are you?
Just out of curiosity.
Stand up, please. Thanks. Is that okay? The person who came, not everybody came, so the ones who said I want it, and we'll be back in touch with Ms. Moss. Is that all right?
That is perfect.
I am so grateful to you all. Thank you so very much. And it's been a pleasure to be with Carnegie Vanguard, and I hope that I'll be able to see you again. And what is fragile? Let me hear it.
Democracy.
Can't hear it.
Democracy.
Are you going to take care of it?
Yeah.
Hear it louder.
Yeah.
One more time.
Yeah.
All right, I can go back to Washington, and I know the nation is in good hands at Carnegie Vanguard. Thank you.